justify or use certain extreme interpretations of Islam to undermine basic rights of women, free expression, and free religion. And that's where I worry. And while we all want it not to be the case, that is a threat. And I think we have to be vigilant to that threat. We all frankly hope that it turns out where Islam is just like, say, the Christian Democratic Party in Germany. It's a religious name, but it doesn't undermine democracy. But we all know that there are other versions as well, with Iran being the perfect example.
He is right in saying that there are people who believe so, or who want to have it, the Islamic Republic. This happened before. But the opposition to that, and through democracy, and we believe that the Egyptian people now is moving very steadily away from those theories. They have seen it, because it is not a question of Islam and democracy. It's a question of a government that has been elected as the representative of the religious trend, and then did nothing. And then there is failure, and there people are angry. Therefore, it is not the religion, it is how governments perform. Here in Egypt, you will see this shift in the public opinion. It is not Islam and democracy, it is performance. It is serving the people or not. And you cannot do bad because you are Muslim. This is wrong. Or do good just because you are a Muslim or Christian. It is also wrong. It is democratic means, democratic theory, democratic practice, and good governance.
Well, let me push this, because it's clearly a very critical issue. Pew, the research center, they did a poll last year which concluded a substantial number in key Muslim countries want a large role for Islam in the political life. Majorities in Jordan and Egypt believe laws should strictly follow the teachings of the Quran. Tom Friedman, what are the implications do you see in the region?
Well, you know, let me try to put it in a little broader context. You know, Isaiah Berlin spoke of the two kinds of freedom, positive freedom and negative freedom. Freedom from and freedom to, okay? So I think what we've seen in the Arab world with the various democratic revolutions is the freedom from stage, freedom from, you know, autocratic rule. Now we're in the freedom to stage. And the question is, freedom to do what? Some people want more freedom to have more religion in their lives and to govern more aspects of their social and economic life. Some people want more freedom to be more sectarian, to be more Shiite or to be more Sunni. And some people want the freedom to be citizens, okay? Citizens with equal rights and responsibilities. But my own experience in this, Nick, is that I really think I would share Amr's point of view in this sense. I think it's all about the context within which people live their lives, okay? India is the second largest Muslim country in the world. I mean, there's probably more Muslims there than in Pakistan, all right? So Islam reflects itself politically, socially, religiously in a certain way there. I really believe when people live in an environment of security and one with economic opportunity, that's going to be reflected in religion and how they express it. And I would point to Iraq. I mean, you know, no one likes to talk about Iraq because America was there, and you know, it's like against the law to talk about what happened there. But I think it's very important to actually study the evolution there. When it was rampant insecurity and economic devastation, you had the height of sectarianism. People forget Iraq's third election, the Iraqi people demanded that the major parties run on multi-sectarian tickets, including Shiites, Sunnis, and Kurds. Both Alawi and Maliki ran on multi-sectarian. Now that's broken down as security has broken down. So I don't think you can talk about religion, you know, X the context of security and economic growth.
Ahmed Davutoglu.
I think the basic threat to democracy in the Muslim world is not Islam, but it is this approach, this Orientalist approach by some other observers. Because once we analyze Christian societies, we don't make this type of classifications, although we know, even in the United States, there are people who are suggesting to bomb Kaaba. Or there are people in Europe, like Breivik, trying to create a new holy crusade against Muslims. First of all, we have to understand Quranic teaching. I know Quran. I read all Quran, and several times, of course. The basic value of Quranic teaching is human dignity. And the basic value of democracy is human dignity. They do not contrast each other. The basic mechanism to find a truth in Quran is collective rationality, what we call ijma. And the basic mean in democracy to find a solution is collective rationality. Why do we do election? because we believe that collective rationality does not mislead you.
But we do have to address Ken Roth's concern, though, about the discrimination against women.
Yeah, that's
yes,
right.
so that I think I would agree with Ken. It's more visible. Very many harmful practices against women. On the other hand, it is being addressed. I love that Algeria came up with the quota for women parliamentarians, and they have 146 women in parliament. I think it's better than the United States even.
I fully agree with this, but it is not linked to Islam or anything. I can tell you there was more discrimination in Turkey when there was some radical secularist approach against Muslim students wearing hijab. This is, all type of discrimination is wrong, whether based on this ideology or the other ideology. I fully agree. Women's rights should be supported, and that is another...
I would just add, though, to Ken's point, which is that, I don't think the concern of Copts, Christians in Egypt, for their rights and inclusion under the current government is just an Orientalist invention. There are Muslim parties there that have expressed views that are deeply exclusionary. I think they're not the majority, but I don't think it's just an invention of foreign Orientalists.
Right, well, let's keep moving. There are so many issues here to at least try and cover and acknowledge. I'm getting a couple of emails here saying that, that certainly Islam is no obstacle to democracy, but so-called Democrats can use religion for their purposes, especially in countries with a high level of illiteracy and poverty. But let's move it forward to the danger of from extremism, to Vali Nasser, who is Dean of the Johns Hopkins School in Washington, D.C., and recently in the US government. The way, particularly after what's been happening in Mali and Algeria, this could all be derailed.
The way we're approaching this issue of the role of Islam in democracy, I think is not correct. The issue is not whether Islam is compatible with democracy, but that the Arab Spring has brought to power political parties that are ideological and are committed to Islamic State. The problem is not Islam, is the notion of Islamic State. And secondly is that behind these political parties, we're now seeing essentially a revival of Al-Qaeda. When Arab Spring happened, the perception was that it has finished off Al-Qaeda, that the ideological sweep in the region is presenting the youth, the populations with new opportunities, democratic vision, and that the vision of Al-Qaeda is going to die down. And what we're seeing is two things happening. One is that Al-Qaeda is coming back very healthy and very aggressive and very virile in places that we didn't see it, such as in Algeria. And secondly is that we're talking about democratic institutions, but state institutions in the Middle East are collapsing. Militaries in Egypt, the militaries lost control of the Sinai. In Syria, the state has completely disappeared altogether. And in Libya, similarly, there is no state really to speak of. And in Tunisia, the state has been significantly weakened. And we can debate about the politics of democracy, but the reason why I think democracy is in trouble is because of the rise of extremism, collapse of state power, and the fact that political parties are taking over whose ideology has no commitment to democracy.
Amr Moussa.
I believe what Nasser said is right. The Qaeda is a phenomenon by its own. It does not represent Islam or the way Islam or Muslims are being governed. We, in fact, most of us hate what the Qaeda is doing. And now we will have to stand firm if they are going back to their practices in disturbing societies. The Islamic religion has nothing to do with this, and at the same time does not contradict democracy. And I must underline that when we talk about Sharia, all of us, from all walks of national life in a country like Egypt or in the Arab world, we do that out of respect to our Sharia. But we differ about certain interpretations and certain extent, the extent to which we would carry the effects or the influence of this or that rule into our lives.
Ahmed Davutoglu, Turkey is being very assertive in so many of these countries with money, with political contacts, with support. Is part of your reason for doing that to prevent this kind of move towards extremism, which Vali Nasser has so eloquently just highlighted?
I fully agree with Nasser's approach and analysis. Today, what we are facing in our region is during this transformation, the state structures are dissolving and getting collapsed almost. Therefore, from the very beginning of Arab Spring, we had a clear strategy. We said, during the transformation, we will support the demands of the people everywhere, and we will use diplomacy for this transition. After transformation after election, we decided to have special relations with these countries, and we established high-level strategic council meetings with Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, and now we are preparing for Yemen and Morocco as well. High-level strategic council meeting means all ministers are meeting together, co-chaired by two leaders, and we are matching these ministries, and usually the other side requests from us about our own experience, how to reform health system, how to reform financial system, how to reform educational system. In the last 10 years, we made many reforms, and we are sharing our experiences. Delegations are going and coming. Just to give an example, in Cairo now, we are trying to share our experience for municipal administration to clean the city, because daily life of the people should change. There should be a visible change in order to make democracy successful. Therefore, we made two agreements with Tunisia, and we gave $500 million, 100 million donation, the rest soft loan. With Egypt, $2 billion as a financial assistance, as soft loan. We will be doing more, but more important is to exchange the experience in order to make these new democracies a success, especially Egypt.
I think it's great what Turkey is doing to help with institution building. It's hugely necessary, but it's not sufficient. The sufficient thing for any functioning democracy to be sustainable is trust. I trust that if I elect you to office, you'll vacate office, when I leave. It's not rule or die. And because of the way democracy came in these countries, in this very abrupt way, okay, and in places where there has been no Mandela and no midwife to mediate the trust between different communities that were kept, in many cases, in fear of one another. And I always go back to the movie Invictus, if you've never seen it, a great Hollywood movie about Nelson Mandela. And there's just a wonderful scene in the beginning where the new head of sports, Ministry of Sports, for the ANC, new Mandela government, they want to change the name of the national rugby team, most important sports team in South Africa, from the Springboks, which was the name of the white regime. They wanted to give it an African name. And Nelson Mandela, in this wonderful scene in the movie, lectures his followers and says, no, we're not going to do that. We must surprise them. We must surprise them. And I guess what I missed most in the Arab Spring, nobody has surprised me. Morsi never came out and said, you know what?
Didn't he surprise you when he suddenly announced taxes and what he was going to do last November?
No, he didn't surprise me in the evolution of the Constitution, as he said, which to me is so important, that when you don't have trust, that everyone agree on the rules is really, really important. And he, I think, could have bought himself so much space and time had he come out and said, I've heard you. I've heard your concerns. You know what? Let's take 3 more months. We're a country of 5,000 years. Let's take a few more months and write this Constitution in a way that everyone will feel embraced of it.
Let's move on with some other points. Giorgio, you were Foreign Minister of Singapore until a couple of years ago. There was an election in Singapore. You're no longer Foreign Minister. I've heard you talk about how quite shocked you were about the impact of the next generation on a political change in a place like Singapore. What have you learned as a former politician now about the ability of politicians to cope with this change in the democratic framework?
Well, democracy as a broad movement is unstoppable. But we shouldn't make it into an ideology. The test is whether we achieve good governance. And whether or not we achieve good governance, which is the point Amri Musa talked about, depends on how we adapt democracy to specific situations. You cannot disregard Islamic values in Islamic society. It's just not possible. And in a country where there are tribal, ethnic, religious differences, these have got to be taken into account. If you just implement a simplistic one-man, one vote, then the minorities will feel that democracy is oppression by the majority. So in the end, you need democracy with Arab characteristics, you need democracy with Myanmar characteristics, you need democracy with Chinese characteristics. So I think the granularity at which we analyze democracy